This is the 18 Strong Podcast with Jeff Pellizzaro, episode number 57.
Welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast, where you get direct access to the world's greatest experts on training harder, practicing smarter, and playing better golf. Now, here's your host, Jeff Pellizzaro.
Hey, what's up? Welcome to the 18 Strong Podcast. I'm Jeff Pellizzaro, your host, golf fitness professional, physical therapist. And today we've got an incredible guest on the line. We've got Charlie Weingroff, who is basically one of the biggest names in the world of strength and conditioning, physical therapy, and especially in the golf fitness world. A lot of us saw him at the World Golf Fitness Summit, and Charlie is one of those guys who people like myself, fitness professionals, physical therapists, strength and conditioning coaches, athletic trainers, we look to for answers regarding how to get better at our craft, how to work more effectively with our patients, our clients. Charlie does a lot of speaking, continuing education seminars. He's got DVDs, videos, all kinds of things where we go to learn. So he's one of the guys that's at the forefront of a lot of the training and rehab processes. He worked for a long time in the NBA with the 76ers, worked with the U.S. Marine Corps Special Ops. He works with the Canadian national basketball team and basically consults all over the world. I was on his Facebook page and actually saw some pictures even over with the guys from Manchester United. So we've got a world-class instructor and coach in our grasp here today. And Charlie just basically knows his stuff. This is a guy that he doesn't just go in and train, by the seat of his pants. He backs everything that he does with legitimate evidence and science-based techniques. And it's funny because you would think, well, isn't that what you're supposed to do? Yes, it is what you're supposed to do as a fitness professional and therapist. But the training world is a very funny thing, especially the golf world, the golf fitness world, as I'm doing air quotes as I talk, because as I've mentioned on the show before, I'm not a big fan of the term golf fitness. I think it's kind of a misnomer. I think it's kind of goofy. And I think in many ways we're all athletes, and it's refreshing to hear and talk to Charlie, somebody who is, again, at the top of the game, to hear him talk about how he trains his athletes, how he trains his golfers, and how he looks at each individual as a person, looks at their body, looks at their movements, and the fact that golfers really aren't different than any other athlete. And so, as a physical therapist myself, not practicing necessarily clinical physical therapy these days, I'm more in the fitness realm and working with golfers and, a little bit more on the strength side. I'm not a strength and conditioning coach by any means and don't claim to be. But, coming from the from the physical therapy world, that's more of the rehab setting. And so when I got into the golf world, I kind of jumped in to the fitness game in the golf realm. And I'll be the first to admit, I did a lot of crappy golf-looking exercises with my clients because I thought that's what you're supposed to do. These clients were coming for workouts to improve their golf game. And so what do? You make the exercises look like a golf move. And I've learned a lot over the past, half a decade or more, and realized that the most efficient training methods are training people to be stronger, more balanced, more structurally sound, reduce limitations, reduce functional issues, mobility and stability problems, and not necessarily work on golf-related technique type stuff, which unfortunately is what we see in many different situations. Now, I think we've heard this over and over and over on the 18 Strong podcast that, there are better ways to train golfers than just making something look golfy. So, as I mentioned, it's refreshing to hear Charlie come on and explain some of these things and back it up with the science as to why we need to get away from some of these very golfy, or as Charlie coined the phrase, or coined the word, golfish movements and golfish training methods. So I will warn you that this interview has a couple sound issues, couple connection issues. Charlie and I had a couple cutouts on our Skype connection. So I did some editing. I cut out some of the dead spaces, and we were able to kind of recapture some of the different questions and everything. But there are some choppy areas, so I apologize for that. But, rather than stop and re-record an entire conversation. We had so many good thoughts going and good answers coming from Charlie that I wanted to just continue and keep the tape rolling. So again, I apologize for some of the sound mistakes, but we were able to capture all the meat and potatoes of the interview. So without further ado, I introduce to you Charlie Weingroff. Hey, Charlie Weingroff, welcome to the 18 Strong podcast, and thanks for coming on.
All right, Jeff, great job. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you bet. So for the audience listening, Charlie, you're a physical therapist, athletic trainer, certified strength coach, but you've got quite a resume. You've worked with a lot of teams, a lot of different professions. So just give us a little bit of background on you, your schooling, and your expertise, and what has brought you to where you are today in the training world, how you're related to golf, and all that good stuff.
Well, yeah, I think when you look at my resume, sometimes other professions might be like, wow, he's really bounced around a lot, to be a red flag. But when you work in professional sports, there is an upward ladder, as well as there's some degree of you get hired to get fired, and at some point you have to move on. So for every time I moved on, obviously there's a place that I landed. So I've had a lot of experience really right out of PT school. In fact, it was even while I was in PT school, I got my first job in professional basketball. And I think at that point, when I was going through PT school, I kind of had it in my mind that I really wanted to work in the NFL or the military. And that didn't happen right away, but ironically, 10 years later, working with the military was something that I was doing. But up to that point, right from graduating PT school in 1999, I was always in some capacity in professional basketball, and I've been head strength and conditioning coach in the NBA. So obviously that's a big part of my career. I've had some other stops, built facilities for a local hospital in between my last opportunity in the NBA, and that is, in fact, I know we're a very golf-centric type of podcast here. That's really where my first exposures to golf and training and rehabbing golfers, and I'm sure we can talk about that in a little bit. And then I moved on to be director of physical resiliency, rehabilitation. I was a lead physical therapist for the United States Marine Corps Special Operations Command, and a lot of very positive things there. Some things weren't quite the right situation for me, and then moved on and then started kind of working for myself at among some other places, started to get on the speaking circuit, and it's kind of like what I do now. And my home base is Drive 495 in New York City, where we train and treat folks, whether it's training or physical therapy. It's a very golf-friendly facility. We've got some bays, and we certainly have the opportunity to see a lot of Pro-Am guys as well as PGA guys. I often get some messages and some opportunities to consult with a lot of the names that many of us know. But which again I'm sure we'll get into, my philosophy on rehabbing or training the golfer really is very, very steep in the same principles of training a special operator, a basketball player, or the dozens of different types of athletes that exist. So that's my background, and I really, as a physical therapist, strength and conditioning, things skew more towards strength and conditioning or fitness. If we do fitness the right way, we have less of a need for rehabilitation, and we try to take those principles, and instead of funnel them into rehabilitation, we'll funnel them into recovery, so that we can continue to perform and continue to deliver training sessions, whether they're technical and tactical of practicing our skills or developing biological power of fitness, endurance, power, et cetera, et cetera. So I really feel very strongly about blending those two and simply providing whatever the individual requires after the right type of evaluation, and just try to put things in motion from that perspective.
So working with athletes of the likes of, NBA basketball players, the special op forces with the Marines, the highest of level golfers, what are some of the commonalities that you see amongst these type of elite athletes and individuals?
Basic physiology and neurology is really the common link. We're all humans, and we're all engaged in different aspects as far as what we're trying to accomplish. Obviously, the physiological demands of all the different types of individuals that you mentioned are different, and we need to create a human system that can absorb those different types of specific stressors. But really, every of the things of the athletes that you mentioned, the commonalities is that every one of them need to move well enough. They need to move strong enough. They need to move for a long period of time. These are all the commonalities, and how the system improves itself. Like, how do we get more fit? How do we get better at our technical skills, like the golf swing? How do we improve motion, or how do we change pain? The body does it the same way. It doesn't matter what sport you play. There's different scientific principles that apply to humans. And the commonality of all of those different high-level athletes and individuals is basically that they respond to what we do as therapists or chiros or trainers or golf pros. The body responds the same way. There's a set of rules as to how we change the system, and the commonality is that they're all the same. Now, where they have to get to at the end is different. And then where they are to start, I could suggest that the highest level of athlete, they typically are exposed to training methods that maybe only fill the buckets that they think they need, because it's a highly sensitive, it's a highly, at times, pandering a part of the profession to work with these high-level individuals. It's very glorious, to be able to say you work with a lot of these high-level individuals. So a lot of times it does not breed the most elite of practitioners. It does not breed the most elite of scientific processes. So these athletes wind up actually being very, very deficient at certain qualities that can certainly help them perform. And that's another interesting commonality that you'll see at the top level individuals.
Well, I'd like for you to expand a little bit. You said that there are basically scientific rules on how we change and how we adapt. Can you kind of jump into that for us a little bit?
In a nutshell, there's a process. One of the ways to describe it is called the General Adaptation Syndrome, GAS. And this is not a new concept or theory. A professor as early as the 1930s, Hans Selye, was talking about how we could condition the human body to become something different than to this process, and this is the training process. And that process begins with overloading the system. If you want something that you don't have, and there's a systematic process to achieve it. So the first step of general adaptation syndrome is literally shocking the system. The body must be aware of this input or this stress that's of significance, where if you're going to lift something, it needs to be of significant weight. It has to be heavy enough. If you're going to improve endurance, at some point, the body needs to recognize that, oh my God, this is like a really far distance, or I'm really out of breath, or some kind of recognition, or I have no idea how to do this particular skill. Now, achieving fitness has a somewhat different set of rules than acquiring new skills, but what is common through both of them is that the body must be shocked. There must be this overload, and subsequently, after the body has been exposed to this very, very challenging level of stress, we have to practice, and we cannot continue to deliver very, very high levels of stress. It needs to be able to withstand more stress and then recover, et cetera, et cetera. And this doesn't mean day by day. again, those rules are based on if we want to do something, it probably has to be very, very hard, and the body has to recognize this. And then if we play our cards right in terms of delivering stress, the body now recognizes that when this stress comes again, it doesn't have this shocked response. The body's now resilient because it changes. So the next time you lift that dumbbell, there's changes in the muscle, there's changes in the brain, and it doesn't feel so heavy anymore. So then you got to make it heavy again, provided that lifting that dumbbell is a task that you find relevant to your training process. But so that followed after the proper doses, and now there's changes. We've probably finished at a level that's higher than where we started. This is called compensation or super compensation. And this is where we have to now reanalyze the system and somewhat start over in terms of determining what is the proper load and what is the proper stress. Sometimes if we continue to deliver high levels of stress to the system, then that super compensation becomes overreaching, non-functional overreaching, and now we actually get worse than where we started. And that general adaptation syndrome, that curve, is the same way that we become more fit or more powerful. It's the same way that we learn how to swing a club. It's the same exact way that we improve range of motion, and it's the same exact way that we change pain. Now, when we change pain is a little bit different. There's not this recognition of physiological fatigue. But as we do our manual therapy or some of our low-level types of exercises for a painful individual, the body recognizes something that's very, very new and different, and then we have this immediate response. We dose it by being very, very intelligent and very, very keen, and then we stop when we're better, and then we reevaluate and start all over again. And again, that's the commonality of how our body changes, regardless of what the particular bucket, if you will, that we're trying to fill.
So, and I'm sure we'll get into this in a little bit. I like that you said there's differences in fitness versus acquiring technical skill. And so I'm going to come back to that and talk about the golf swing and, what are some of the proper ways of training and working on different things there. But when we were kind of going back and forth about the interview tonight, I asked, what's one thing that you would love for the audience to take away from our conversation? And I wrote this down because I think this sentence is great. You said that legitimate training is not only going to screw up your swing, but can be a part of a great process of excellence and progression. I'm going to let you just go ahead and follow up with that.
Well, I just think that as the levels of expertise that the public golfer, the general population golfer has, the messengers that are highly available, it's very disturbing to me as these different training aids and these different styles and approaches to what is called fitness. They're really, it's just totally erroneous. There's no approach that is significant to science. And there's the message that I really would want is not so much to downgrade what's out there, but rather for people to understand that to physically enhance your body for the game of golf is absolutely no different in principle and philosophy as any other sport. Golf is not different in any way whatsoever from any other sport, and those that suggest that it is usually are people that have this incredible personal love for the game of golf, and they have been bred and conditioned mentally within the circle of significant things that really away from athletic development. Why this is all conjecture and theory. The fact is that to train to improve your fitness that relates to golf, to train to improve the skill of your swing with the different types of clubs, etc., is the same exact way a quarterback practices his throws. It's the same exact way a tennis player practices his serves. It's the same exact way an Olympic lifter practices his technical skills, etc. And I think that's important that number one, there's nothing wrong with engaging in very, very intense general physical preparedness, if for no other reason that you're a healthier individual. But these things can they're not going to screw up your swing. Now, stupid training will screw up your swing, just like stupid training will screw up an NFL's quarterback's throw, and it'll screw up a pitcher's pitching motion. Now, because I think a lot of, if your initial exposure was with, you got screwed up, that's human nature. It's going to be very difficult to trust the next person. But because there's this notion that golf is different and somehow lifting weights is going to screw up your swing, this is not at all supported by any kind of science. There's many different ways to train that will not create these changes in your body that are not conducive. Now, again, that's possible. But if you're intelligent and understand training, and I think what I would really like the general public to know is, just because you're holding a golf club doesn't make it golf specific, and not everybody builds big giant muscles that get in the way of a great swing and upper body rotation. These are all falsehoods. It's just I probably would want to use different words, but I'm trying hard not to do it. It's so ludicrous that and these are reputable. They're signed by companies that make golf equipment, and it's just absolutely ludicrous that somehow these golf pundits and experts, like, my only question would be, like, well, what science are you going by? Like, why do you think that? Why do you make these statements other than because you're so bound to this cultural uniqueness of the game of golf that just blinds you to the preparation of the human system?
Well, this is awesome, because this is one of the reasons why I was so excited to get you on the show, because first of all, I've used the term golfish. I can't tell you how many times on the show, and have credited you with pretty much inventing that term. And
well, you should.
Yeah, exactly.
I did make it up.
Yeah, I mean, so when I heard you say that at the World Golf Fitness Summit, I was like, man, that's the perfect term. And I've seen you speak, I've seen some of your presentations, and I just really like the whole presence that you have around this topic. And I know that there's so many. Golf is such a gadgety environment, culture. There's so many different things where people are making money off of these different swing aids and pieces of equipment and things like that. And I don't know where and at what point it was deemed that golf should train like a different sport, because exactly what you said. I mean, we all have the same bodies. We all basically move the same to some degree, and we all get better in similar manners. So one thing I want to ask you, when training for the technical side of golf, skill-related instances versus, strength, power, speed, what are some of the differences in how you go about applying those stressors? Let's look more so at the technical side first, because I want to know how you at Drive, maybe work on some of the technical things, and then how does that look as far as separation from your physical training?
It's an interesting question because, like I explained, like the general adaptation syndrome is exactly the same. To change the constituency of your muscles that can allow you to hit the ball farther or longer or for a more period of time, as if you actually learn how to do it. So the principles that you have to create something that's challenging. Now, in my opinion, should we be? And when I say it's my opinion, I'm just trying to be like non-controversial. This isn't my opinion. This is how this is how training works. Yeah, but I think that the first step in determining when you choose, if you're looking at a high-level individual, of which there are very, very few in the game of golf. Even the highest golfers have such a low training age for fitness that this, what I'm about to say, doesn't even matter. Mm-hmm. So for general population, they should just be training like anybody at the gym, unless they've been training for a very, very long time, at which point we have to come to a decision that anything that we choose that develops fitness, and we can start to say fitness is strength, power, or endurance. there's really, it's difficult to, other words will really just mean the same things. Those movements should have a muscular pattern of contraction that directly carries over to the golf swing. And again, very, very few people should be doing this. If you're suggesting that most of the listeners here are general population, you do not need to do any kind of strength or endurance drills that are direct carryover to the game of golf. You do not. Like, this is not, and the reason why is because the base of of your general fitness is so low that anything will help you, and there's no reason to become special in your training. But if we are going to get to that point for, let's say, a PGA golfer who did play at a Division I school that had a legitimate strength and conditioning program, and they did apply like the real rules of science and didn't think golf was different. We look at the game of golf, and ultimately we hinge, we rotate, and we do so extremely powerfully. So what movements do we have that can support the technical skills of the swing? So we can look at med ball throws, deadlifts, and all of our Olympic lifting variations. And pretty much that's it. When you get to a very, very high level of the game of golf, you really don't need to be doing different moves, because anything that you do that doesn't relate to your game, you're not getting better. There's dozens of other movements as well that will help us maintain the very keen joint positions that are required for the game of golf. And those joint positions, at least for me, are illustrated through the Titleist golf performance screen. So when we do all those different movements, we're looking, can joints get into particular positions? And then secondly, can we control those positions? But the most important thing is that if at least your joints can do it, we can then acquire the skills. And that takes us to the second part of what you were asking about. When you're looking to acquire a new skill, we can kind of break it into different categories. Number one, how do we improve thoracic rotation? That's a general skill. So the rules are always the same, but we're going to look at the general skills. Then we can look at the specific skills, which would be actually swinging the golf club. And this I have absolutely nothing to do with. I feel very good about being able to converse with people that are far more expert than I. But ultimately, in our training, we have absolutely nothing to do with any kind of drill that would be designed to improve or change their ability to swing a golf club. That's the job of the golf pro. They are better at it than we are, and we don't do anything other than support that process. Now, if they have some drills that the golf pro have given them, there's absolutely no reason that we cannot put that part of the program, but that is completely technical in terms of what we do as coaches or therapists. You tell Mr. Golf Pro, you tell me what you think this person needs, and we'll handle that from a general physical preparedness level or a special physical preparedness level. But the specifics of the golf swing, we don't do anything to do with that. But again, how does a golf pro impart those particular stressors? The process is the exact same way in how we improve hip mobility or thoracic mobility. And you need a couple different things. Number one, the drill that you choose must be really right at the barrier of this individual's limitation. So if I'm looking to help someone improve thoracic motion, I've got to put them into a position, whether it's neurologically or physiologically, I have to put them into a position where they now recognize that they do not have thoracic rotation. They have to recognize that, like, oh my God, like this, I can barely move. So that we have to maybe use different positions that have nothing to do with the game of golf, but we can isolate the area so that the person cannot compensate in terms of rotating in other areas. So that's the first thing that we need. Number two, the drill, whether it's my hands on your body, doing manual therapy, or you being in quadruped on all fours and working on rotating your upper back, The second thing that you must have is it must deliver some kind of improvement. So basically, if I've chosen a drill that in theory was the correct drill, it actually has to work. It is this weird thing about acquiring motor skills. You actually have to acquire the skill, and people are doing drills like hours upon hours and hours, and it's just the wrong drill for them. Or maybe they need something else before the drill, because in theory it's the right drill, but it might not be the right one for them. So the first step is that it's got to exaggerate your barrier. Number two, you need to have a high level of success, meaning it actually has to work. And the actual best movements that we have that can help us acquire motor skills are the ones that we can do on our own, where we actually do not require coaching after the initial stages. There's some other principles that govern motor skill acquisition of any kind, and they're really governed by what's called the dynamic systems theory, where basically what I've just described is the dynamic systems theory, where it has to begins with exaggerating the mistake, high level of success, and then they can do it on their own. And then you basically retest your motion that demonstrated that whether you have succeeded or not to your standard. If we're looking to achieve 60 degrees of thoracic rotation, which is significant of a PGA golfer, then you have to retest at some point. So if your movement is not working, now how long does it take? Well, that's different for everybody. There's no way of knowing how long it will take. There's no way of knowing what particular little changes or tweaks or different things that can be useful for that person. And that's what dynamic systems is really about. There's really anything can work for anybody, but not anything has to work for him. So that's how you would acquire motor skill in terms of thoracic rotation. We begin with what's called practice, where it's highly coached, it's highly repetitive. You're doing the same thing all the time. But then the best success in terms of continued improvement is when you change blocked practice to random practice. It's no longer your little favorite 3 sets of 10 that your physical therapist gave you. That's completely inconsistent with long-term motor skill acquisition. You don't get better. In fact, you actually get worse. Well, then how do I know how many reps to do? No one knows. These are not answers. These are not questions that can be answered. What we know is that when it's random, and golf is actually difficult to practice randomly, the way you would basically practice randomly would be you don't know which club you're going to hit next with. You don't know which way you're supposed to go. That's actually the best way to demonstrate random practice for the golf swing itself. But how do we do that in general training? Well, the way we do that is by hopefully getting the individual to certain levels of progressions that many different loads, many different foot positions, et cetera, so that we can attack and make that person demonstrate, again, if we're talking about thoracic rotation, with as many different variables as possible. And if we can find as many of those as possible that also help us generate fitness, hip, hip, hooray, we found it. Like the stuff that gets us fit and improves our ability to move, this is the brilliance of a great training program. But we cannot always do that. There's going to be some things that are better used for fitness, and there's going to be some things that are better used for motor skills. And it's just part of the training process. It's if it was more specific, about who and what, it's not like this stuff is, you could buckshot things, which I'm not a big fan of. I don't know why people think that, hiring a therapist or a coach is this evil thing. They go to Bermuda and they go out to dinner, but they don't want to spend on their body.
Right.
But again, like you could do much worse if you are looking for information from a reputable resource. But again, like how does anybody know what's reputable? You try it, you see if it works or not, and then you move on if it's not to your liking.
So let's take that person that is probably listening to the show. They haven't invested in a coach, or maybe they have in the past, and they are a little bit more comfortable in the gym now. What would you say they can take away from, what you guys do at Drive and what you're doing with your athletes, as far as somebody that's looking to kind of create maybe their own program or just get in the gym or just kind of get things started. Where should they start? What are some of the things they should focus on, and what are some of the things that they shouldn't even waste their time on? I think you've already kind of given us a little bit of ideas, but where would you go for this?
Are we talking about fitness or motor skills or both?
Let's go more of the fitness side. More somebody that's looking to get in the gym and get in a little bit better shape, but they want to make it.
If someone's looking to engage in a general fitness program, the first step is finding in a perfect world. I would like everybody to be able to do a pushing exercise, a pulling exercise, a squatting exercise, a hinging exercise, a twisting exercise, and a locomotion exercise. That's all fine and dandy, but at some point, the person may, like the one that I think is a good drill may not be the one for them. So there's got to be some ability of this individual to test. Do they have the prerequisite joint motions to succeed at the fitness choices that they're making? And it's really quite simple. Like, so we're talking. You should not have painful motion, and you should be able to do any of these motions with body weight. There's a functional movement screen, and there's probably a lot of other commercial things that are looking at, can your joints just do this before you embark on this program? And we can then start to pinch grip that program, if you will, where we're going to do a vertical and a horizontal pull, a vertical and a horizontal push, a single leg squat, a double leg squat, a single leg deadlift or hinge, and a double leg. And then we're going to do some kind of power activity. We're going to, there's so many different ways to program, but when we break down movement at a highly general level, what are the 6 things that we do? Well, you could probably measure it down to 5. Push, pull, squat, hinge, twist, and locomote. Twisting and locomote are kind of the same. But, what does locomote mean? Well, you're going to run. You're going to carry something. You're going to push a sled. And if we do so under different types of work to rest ratios, basically how intense are you going, how much rest do you have, you can start to fill a lot of different buckets. And when someone is new to training, the level of complicated is very, very unnecessary. The body will be shocked by many things that you try, so you don't run into trouble, like you don't run into wasting your time. But things have to be challenging, and this is just a very odd concept in how general population golfers are impressed upon through commercial means. Like, stuff has to be heavy. You have to get out of breath at some point. It takes time to not only learn the movements that you're going to use, but then to use enough weight, and you have to be uncomfortable. Again, from a motor skill acquisition or from a fitness development, like, the first step is being shocked. You have to be uncomfortable and trust the process, and make choices that complement what you do well, and where you can succeed in these types of things. So that's a highly general physical preparedness program for someone with a very, very low training age. And when you have a low training age, it's kind of a good thing, because you can do a lot of different things and nothing bad will happen. And then as you have an increased training age, you'll start to have to make some decisions and have to be more advanced, because your body won't be shocked so easily anymore. And you want to get to that point, but how long it takes is always different. What we see in the elite golfers that on tour, they have incredibly high training age of motor skill acquisition, of fundamental movement and the golf swing. But they have just as most of them have such a low training age, very similar to general population. in terms of general physical preparedness from a fitness level. So that same program that somebody who's just about to start in the gym for the first time in their adult life is the exact same program that a lot of top 20 PGA golfers will do, that I would recommend. And quite frankly, the golfers that are at that level are succeeding despite their physical preparedness. It's not reasonable to use them as models of how they prepare their bodies for the game of golf. It's just because and even if they did do some things that were interesting or whatever, just because they do it doesn't mean it's going to work for somebody else. But obviously, many of them do nothing or don't, or would be very antagonistic to the things that I'm saying. I'm just talking about science, and there's this is no reason to be afraid of being uncomfortable when you're training.
Is there anybody on tour or anybody that you've come across in the golf world that you would say does fit into that elite level athlete and high training age?
No. I mean, there's golfers that we work with at Drive that are better than others. But no, I've never seen a golfer who by the time they're even middle 20s, when they're on tour, that has trained with this highly evidence-based, highly scientific approach, making great choices. Just like a veteran of another sport would do. I can't think of anybody.
Of the athletes you've worked with, who would you say is the number one athlete that comes to your mind as far as athletic ability and being at the top of this list?
Well, I've never worked with him, but you hear of stories where Tiger would play pickup with Stanford basketball. And those are some legit, guys, particularly at the time he was there. Like, if I'm not mistaken, like Brevin Knight comes to mind. So as far as the golfers that I've worked with Don at the moment, Morgan Hoffman is, again, came out of a Division I program at Oklahoma State where, lifting is considered like part of what we're trying to accomplish. But he's an athlete, and he is not of the belief that his body will change and he can't golf if he engages in some of the things that we're talking. So Morgan is clearly very, very comfortable with being uncomfortable when he trains. He enjoys training, and he understands that some of the things that we're asking him to do are really, he's at a point where I've actually presented without his name involved, where okay, now it comes this point, like we have to decide, like, do we want to train him generally like a general population person, or do we need to train him like a high level golfer? Because even though there's some things that are good to do, if they do not directly relate to the muscle contraction patterns of golf, we have to make a decision on continue to do that or not. So doesn't mean his body doesn't continue to change positively. Do those positive changes carry over to your sport? And that's when you really get into coaching, and this is useless for golf. I can't really think of anybody that really has this problem where you decide, like, when do you go special physical preparedness away from general physical preparedness. I don't think we're quite there with Morgan yet.
Right. All right, Charlie, I got a couple quick questions just to finish up the interview with here. I'd like to ask everybody that comes on the show, first of all, are you more of a Caddyshack or a Happy Gilmore fan?
Happy Gilmore.
Nice. And if you could ride in a cart or play 18 holes with anybody in the golf world, anybody affiliated with golf whatsoever, and pick their brain, who would it be?
Oh gosh, there's so many. I tend to think that I'd like to bounce like a lot of these ideas and really try to understand, why what I'm saying is so foreign to one of the legends, a guy like Arnold Palmer.
Nice.
Just to see what they would say, it's so somebody that represents such, old school mess. Because there's every once in a while you see a quote from him that doesn't sound old school,
right?
And but like just to understand, because at some point culture had to be made. So let's go back, and I'm sure there's people, prior to his time that were part of this creation of what we see here and how we're trying to help people.
Now, if you had to put into one sentence what the term 18 strong meant, what would you say?
Going out and playing and very little, if anything, is going to be new to you, and that you're not prepared to deliver proper force to overcome.
Love it. All right, and lastly, what do you guys have going on that's got you excited for this upcoming year with your teaching, your training, and everything you have going on?
It's interesting. It's from what there's. I think, quite frankly, there's a lot of business stuff that that I have going on. Some of the things that we'll be doing at Drive. I think those things are very exciting. I mean, to me, there's nothing more exciting this year than any other year where I'm just looking to continue to fill holes and find holes that I did there and build my educational skill set, and then actually put it to use. And that's always exciting. I don't know that that's new, but that's certainly my intent over the next little while.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. I know a couple of the actionable tips and biggest takeaways that I think the audience can take is, first of all, for the golfer, for most golfers and most of us in general, depending on your training age, most of us don't need to get super complicated and specific with what we're doing, as long as smart training is going to create results. But it also has to be, on the other hand, it's got to be intense and create some change. And I think that's where a lot of people some people make things so complicated, but then they forget that sometimes it's just as simple as making it hard to make changes. And so I appreciate you bringing that forward. So,
and that's what golf is. Golfers like doing stuff that's golfish. Of or like the sport of golf, usually to an excessive degree. And you do not need anything specific. Like, just on Twitter or something, like TPI put a picture of the get up, and someone's like, when does a golfer ever crawl around on the floor with a weight over their head? And they used my quote that it doesn't have to look like your sport in order to duplicate some of the muscle activation patterns. And there's so few, and it's just because of the culture. Now, we don't say the same things for other sports because when you grow up playing another sport, it's more acceptable for you to be involved in general physical preparedness. So just training isn't going to screw you up. It's okay. Stupid training is going to screw you up. So now it's incumbent. And quite frankly, I would say, like, if somebody, if somebody really insists on what they do is golf specific, you probably should, look for somebody else. But if marketing gets you in the door and then there's something highly substantial waiting for you, I'm not offended by that. I'm just offended by, this thought process that somehow golf is different. And you could probably say this about any sport. Your sport is not different. You just think it is.
Right.
And that's actually a quote from for 2012 the UK brought in one of the greatest sports scientists, Marco Cardinale, and it's not just golf, but there's lots of the primrose sports like tennis, golf, like this, where it's only for the upper crust. God forbid we put something heavy in our hands and get some calluses, God forbid. But Your body, the way you get better at any biological output is the same, and your sport is not different. You just want it to be because you want it to be. And if we can start to understand that, I think a lot of people's golf game would improve. More importantly, I think people will have a longer lifespan in playing the game of golf because it is not terribly forgiving physically. And that's what golf is. It doesn't have to be specific. It doesn't have to be specific until it has to be specific.
Right. I agree with you on so many levels there. Charlie, where can the audience find you and follow your stuff?
So I have a website, charlieweingroff.com. I'm Charlie Weingroff on Facebook, Charlie Weingroff on Instagram, CWagon75 on Twitter. So that's probably the best places to find me. And I work with folks in New Jersey and New York City at Drive 495.
Perfect. And everybody knows that I'll have everything up on the show notes from our conversation, and then where to find you, links to your website, and all that good stuff. So, Charlie, once again, thank you for coming on, man.
All right, you got it.
As you can tell, Charlie is the real deal when it comes to training. He is absolutely based on, scientific methods, and this dude knows about power. I mean, from a personal perspective, he's done some powerlifting in his day, and I was looking up some of his numbers. He's, I think, in competition squatted 800 pounds, bench pressed 510 pounds, and deadlifted over 600 pounds. So this guy knows something, both personally and from a coaching perspective, on how to generate some true strength, true power. So, Charlie, I want to thank you for coming on the show. And for all of you out there that are looking to improve your golf, looking to improve your fitness level, take a look at what you're doing in the gym and ask yourself, am I pushing myself? Am I creating those changes that Charlie was talking about by, first of all, moving correctly and doing things with the right posture, right form, but then am I pushing myself in regards to the weight that I'm using or whatever it might be? Am I testing those limits? Because if you're not testing those, you're not pushing those boundaries, and then you're not going to make those changes. So ask yourself, are my workouts really doing what I want them to do, or are they simply just golfish exercises that make me feel like I'm doing something, make me feel like I'm becoming a better golfer because it looks like a golf swing, I feel my backswing, all those different things that we talked about. So get away from the golfish exercises, get into a program that's actually going to test you, change you, and make you a better golfer. For all of you guys out there that haven't subscribed to the podcast, please go to iTunes, or you can go to 18strong.com and you can subscribe to the podcast there. If you haven't yet, leave a review. Always love to hear your reviews of the show, how we can make the show better. And of course, if you haven't gone to 18 Strong, speaking of, science-based and evidence-based practices, we've got some swing speed training that is guaranteed to give you a little extra yardage on your drive based on some of the principles that Charlie talked about. Just getting you swinging faster, and working on just some different things that are going to test your boundaries and definitely make you faster. So go over to 18strong.com. You'll see the free ebook, and we've got some videos and everything on swing speed training. So that's a free gift to you from 18 Strong. Once again, thanks for coming to the podcast. Love to hear your feedback. And as always, train hard, practice smart, play better golf.
Thanks for listening to the 18 Strong podcast at www.18strong.com. And remember, train hard, practice smart, and play better golf.